Up until now, we are using the one single piece of geometry to duplicate. So we were either using the box or we were using the sphere in here in this example to duplicate and replicate our geometry. But now let's see how we can incorporate the another pieces of geometry, multiple pieces of geometry. For example, in here I want to copy the sphere in here as well, or maybe some other type of geometry that I like to copy. So let's see how we can do that. First, I'm going to create a very simple example by adding a grid in here. So let's maybe zoom in onto this grid. So here we have this grid, and first I'm going to create a box. Let me make this into this side, and in here let's create a sphere, primitive sphere. And this time let's copy only these two geometries to keep things simple. So we have the box and sphere. So what we can do, we can add a merge node in here, and let's connect all of them, both of these geometry into the merge. And here you can see I cannot see the box because the box scale is smaller, so we need to increase the scale. And here as you can see, we have both of these geometry on top of each other. We have sphere and we also have box. I can add a copy to points node in here, and let's connect this. That is our geometry, and I want to copy this onto these points. So onto this grid points, let's connect this and let's view the result. And here as you can see, let me scale down this overall, or maybe I can just decrease the rows and columns to create less copies. Let me lower this down. And here you can see what this copy to point node is doing. It's actually considering that all of these geometries, so whenever we have, it does not matter how many geometries you have, when we merge them, now it's a single piece of geometry. The copy to points now node does not know that in fact we have these two geometries. It only knows that it is a single piece of geometry. So which means I can keep adding the geometry. Let's say I want to add a rubber toy in here and connect this into the merge, and maybe let's increase the scale. And here as you can see, now we have three geometries, but when we add a merge, now it's a single piece of geometry. Copy to points node does not know that we have in fact three geometries. If we enable the copy to points, and here as you can see, all of our geometry has been copied because it thinks that it's a single piece of geometry. And to actually copy these multiple geometries, we need to tell copy to points node how we want these geometries to be copied onto these grid points. So the way we can do that, we can create a attribute. So in here I want to create a attribute. So let's add an attribute create node. So into the attribute create, so we want to create a string attribute that will store their unique name. So we can call anything of our attributes. I'm going to call this one maybe a my geo. So I'm going to call this one my underscore geo for my geometry, and I'm going to change this to a string attribute. So let's change this to string, and for this one I'm going to name this, because we are storing the box in here, I'm going to name this box. If we go into the geometry spreadsheet, and that is a point attribute, and here as you can see we have a my geo and we have the value of box. Because it's a string, we can check. Here as you can see it's a string, we are storing the box value. So I can duplicate this node again, this attribute create node, and this time connect this in here. And for this one I'm going to call this one sphere, because we have this sphere geometry, and I'm going to duplicate this again, connect this in here, and this one I'm going to calling this one our rubber. So now if we go into the merge node and middle mouse button, so now we have a string. Maybe let's go in here and uncheck this shader attribute, and here as you can see we have a point attribute mygeo and it has a string, and onto these three mean that we have these three unique values. Okay, so that's what this three mean. So if we go into the merge, and sure enough we should have three unique, because we have box, we have sphere, and we also have rubber. So we have these unique values. So now that we have this attribute mygeo, now all we need to do is we need to tell our copy to point to use this attribute to copy onto these grid points. So onto the copy to points, and here we have this piece attribute. So let's enable this, and right now it is expecting a attribute that called name. So but we have the attribute that is called mygeo. So in here, and here as you can see, currently we cannot see this mygeo. I can manually type my attribute mygeo, and here as you can see it's not working and nothing is happening. And that is because we have the mygeo attribute onto this geometry side, but we do not have the same attribute onto these points. If I middle mouse button, here as you can see, currently we do not have a same attribute. So the copy to points node does not know onto which point it should copy which geometry. So we need to create the same attribute onto these points as well. Maybe let's create a more simpler example, and for that I'm going to create a add node. So what the add node will does, it will create a single point. So onto the number of point, right now it's set to 0. I can create a plus by adding the plus. Now we should have a 1 point, and if we zoom in and enable my point display, and here as you can see at the origin we have a 1 point, and we can check if we middle mouse button, here as you can see we have a 1 point, and here we can set the position of our point, and here as you can see this position is moving. So in here I'm going to create 3 points. To easier to work with, we can actually create 3 points in here and play around with their position, and here as you can see we have these 3 points and we have the positions defined here. So the point 1 have a 0 0, and the second point we have this x value change. To actually make this easier, I'm not going to create multiple points using this method, but I'm going to just duplicate this node, and for this one I'm going to just change the value, and for this one let's duplicate this one more time, and let's add another increment value, and in here I can add a merge node, and I'm going to select all of these nodes and merge them together, and now we have these 3 points. If I middle mouse button, as you can see we have 3 points. I can create the same attribute, this one attribute create. So what I would like to do, I can just duplicate this node, and in here I'm going to connect this one. At the first one I'm going to copy the box geometry, and for the second one I'm going to duplicate this another one and connect this in here, the same attributes, connect this onto this side. So the first point will get a mygeo attribute, the value of box, and the other one will get a sphere, and the last one will get this rubber toy. And we can check if we middle mouse button, here as you can see we have this mygeo string attribute and it has 3 unique values, and we can inspect by going onto the geometry spreadsheet, onto the point attribute, and here as you can see points number 0 get box, 1 gets sphere, and 2 gets rubber. So now we are ready to plug this into our copy to points node. So now I can connect this in here, and when this option is enabled, this mygeo attribute, and if I view the result, and sure enough, let me hide my point display, And here as you can see, now we have these three geometries copied onto these points, their corresponding points. So let me adjust the position. So that is our rubber toy. Let me play around with this position or adjust this position. And what I'm actually doing, I'm just playing around with their point positions where we are creating these 3 points. So we are using these 3 points to copy our this geometry. So now copy to points node knows that which point it should copy which geometry, right? So that is the whole purpose of creating the MyGeoGeometry on both stream, because we have an identifier in here, so that is the box, and we have an attribute that we are assigning the label you are an a box, and that is our sphere, that is an a rubber toy. We are assigning the labels, and onto the points we are also assigning the label that whenever this copy to points node will copy, it will look for this MyGeo attribute. So if this point has a value of box, it will copy the box. If this point has a value of sphere, it will copy the sphere. I can change this. For example, if I go into this one, this second one where it says sphere, if I were to change the value, let's say I want to copy a box in here, I just need to change the value. If I change this to box, and here as you can see, now the second point will also copy the box. I can make this onto our last point to the box as well. I can change this to box, and now all of the points will copy the box geometry, and now the copy to points node is discarding all of these geometries because it cannot find the corresponding this attribute value. If you go into the geometry spreadsheet onto these points, because all of these points has a box, so that is why copy to points node will only copy box. I think that makes sense. So now let's see how we can automate this process, because right now we are manually assigning the MyGeo attribute onto our these 3 points. But in case of grid, where we have lot more points, we can actually create this my attribute. I can just connect this in here, and I can go into my group tab. In here I can define my point number. If I enable my point number display, let's say I want to copy onto the point number 13. To the 13 I want to copy the box, and I can just duplicate this my attribute node and connect this after that. And onto the point number 18, let's say onto the point number 18 I want to copy my rubber geometry, and I'm going to copy one more time, connect this, and for this one, point number 16 maybe, onto the point number 16 I want to copy the sphere. And now if I connect this, we should get these values. And let me see why it's not working. So we have the MyGeo attribute. Let me check. So actually onto the group, it's actually not working, because maybe I think we need to define onto the group type in here. So guess from group, it's actually not working. Let's explicitly tell this to point, which means that we are not referring to this primitive number, because if we have the primitive number and we also have the point number, and that is why this group tab is actually getting confused. So we may need to manually change this group type to points, because we are actually telling Houdini that this 18 is actually a point number and not a primitive number. Okay, that's what we are doing. So I'm going to change this to points. And now if I middle mouse button, and here as you can see, now we get these 3 unique values. So now we should see these 3 results, and here as you can see, we have these 3 geometries copied, and all of the other that does not have the attributes, these points, because we have lot more points, but we can only see 3 geometries because other do not get the name attribute. Here as you can see, the MyGeo attribute is empty, so that is why no geometry has been copied onto these points. So what I can do, I can duplicate this node at the very top in here, and for this one I'm going to just remove the group field, and in here I'm going to just assigning the same value onto our this sphere. So if we select this last node, so we will get the feedback of this geometry spreadsheet onto this last node. So all of the empty points will get a sphere value, and all of the values that we have defined, the box and rubber, they will get their own. So now we should see the sphere, box, and all of them will get the sphere. These empty points will get the sphere. So that's what we were doing. We were just assigning a sphere plane value. That's a manual way of doing things. So that's how this actually working. So now let's see how we can actually automate this process. To actually copy this MyGeo attribute onto these points, we have a node called attribute from pieces. So if you type attribute from pieces node, here we have this. Let me add this. So this one has two inputs. The first, it needs the point clouds. So these are the points that I want to transfer the attribute. Okay, so let's connect this. That should be our point cloud, and it requires the geometry library. And there we have the geometry library, okay, because all of the geometries are in here. So I can connect this in here, and now if I were to view this, and now by default it is looking for the attribute that is called name. So the attribute name should be set to name. So but we want to copy this MyGeo attribute. So we need to rename this in here onto the attribute from pieces. Let's say I'm going to say transfer the MyGeo attribute, because that's the attribute where we have their identifier, these. So now if I middle mouse button, and here as you can see we have MyGeo, and it is successfully transferred onto these grid points, which mean now I can use this node as an A input. And now if I view the result, and here as you can see, now we are copying multiple geometry onto these grid points, which mean I can keep adding more points, and it will take care of all of these naming and all of these things. This attribute from pieces node will procedurally copy all of these attributes in here onto this geometry. All right, so which mean, so if I were to add another geometry in here, let's say if I were to introduce a platonic in here, so let's add a platonic solid, that is a primitive pyramid shape onto the platonic. We can change the solid type. We have this cube, we have this octahedron, different types of primitives. So what I would just need to do, let's keep this as an example. Let's select all of these nodes and create a box around it by clicking this option. That will create this box. Now I can easily move this. So now let's place this in here, and to actually incorporate this into this geometry library, as you know, we need to create the attribute first. So I'm going to copy this my attribute, connect this in here, and I'm going to call anything. We don't need to, I'm going to type just random numbers. Just connect this in here, and now it will automatically get copied onto these points because of this attribute from pieces, and we should start to see these platonic, and here we have it. We are in here creating these name attributes manually, but we can actually create these attributes automatically as well. If you do not want to every time create these attributes by your hand, you can actually automate this process as well. So let's see how we can do that. And for that, I'm going to just duplicate this whole setup by selecting all of these nodes, press and hold the Alt key and drag. And for this one, I'm going to just remove these attribute create nodes because I don't want to manually create these attributes. So in here, to actually automatically create this, we have a node called connectivity. So if I add a connectivity node in here, so let me find, here we have the connectivity. If I connect this, what this node will do, it will look for the connectivity of the points. Here as you can see, we have the connectivity type for the points, or we can define the primitives, and it will assign them a unique value. So right now we are creating an attribute class. If I middle mouse button, and here as you can see, we have the attribute name class. So the box geometry is an A1 connected piece of geometry, and I can confirm if I enable my selection tool and double click, and here as you can see, that is an A1 connected piece of geometry. I can go into the sphere, and that is an A1 piece of geometry. And if I go into my rubber toy and double click, and here we have some multiple pieces of connected geometry, so that will create some problem, but we will see. So here as you can see, we have multiple pieces of connected geometries, which mean that they will get their own unique values. But the platonic one, let me select this node. Okay, so the node must be selected, otherwise the viewport will template your currently selected node, because right now the rubber toy is selected. That is why we have this wireframe of this geometry. So you must need to select this onto the node editor as well. And here you can see we have this one connected piece of geometry. First, I'm going to just remove this, and we will take a look at how we can fix this one problem. But now, to make this simple, we have these three connected pieces of geometry. And by using the connectivity node, it will look for the connectivity and assign them a unique value. And right now we are creating an integer attribute. We can create a string. And if I middle mouse button, here as you can see, now we have class and we have three values. I can go into the geometry spreadsheet, and it's actually creating a primitive attribute. So let's go in here, and here as you can see, we have this one piece 0 and 1 2. We can actually keep this to integer as well, that will work also. And here as you can see, we have this value from 0 1 2. So all of them will get a unique value based on their connectivity. So now I just need to connect this in here. Now there we have the geometry library, and that should be our this newly copy to points node. And I just need to tell onto the attribute from pieces node that now my geo attribute is no longer exist, but now look for the class attribute instead. So let's go into the attribute from pieces, and in here I'm going to type the class attribute. And if I enable the copy to points, and it's not working because I think we need to create a point attribute. So right now it is a primitive, so we need to change this to points. And let me see, oh, actually it was not working because we forgot to tell on in here, because the copy to points node is still using my geo attribute. So we need to tell this class, and here as you can see, we are copying all of these geometries. So which mean I can keep adding more geometry, and if I were to add this one, because it has multiple pieces, we should get multiple pieces copied. So let's check, let's connect this and connect this, and here as you can see, we have all of these pieces copied randomly, and we can change their distribution by going on to the attribute from pieces. And in here right now the mode is set to cycle, we can change this to patch. Maybe let's explore this further in the next lesson, because I think the time is over for this class. So let's take a look at this in the next lesson.